For a company to successfully execute on collaboration and to execute on partnership, the factors that are important on this journey is what I call the 3 C's. Any partnership or any collaboration needs to understand the context of the business and the context of the product. Lots of times it's missed out. The reason is it's not just about having the right skilled people, it's about having the right skill of people who have the context of the work that needs to get executed. The moment you say that I need to develop, we had a lot of conversation this morning about cloud enablement. Let's assume that we have a conversation that says that I need to move my product from an on-premise to a software as a service product. The question that comes is, if I have to partner with that company, we have to understand what's the context of the business. How much of the revenue comes from maintenance? How do you translate that into a subscription model? The second important parameter, the second C, is around the culture. And the culture is more to do with the engineering culture. The culture is more to do with the way in which the philosophy of the organization is in terms of building their products and getting their products out into the market. Again, in all the labs that we have built, I've consistently seen that no two cultures are identical. When we built a lab for business objects and we created the products for them, the culture of that lab was far different from the lab that we are running for Pearson. Because the culture is inherently local to that organization, and unless and until you are able to resonate with that culture, you'll never be able to create the right kind of a partnership and a collaboration model. And the last is constraints. As long as there is business, there will be constraints. And as long as there are constraints, there would be ways in which you'll have to address that. So if we have to build a partnership and a collaborative model, the question is, how do we address the constraints that is inherently within the ISV ecosystem, and how do you make sure that you're able to address it? A classic example that comes is every time when we had a new roadmap that was drawn out for business objects, we had a case where the new market priority came in place. When we had a situation when we were just getting into steady state with respect to the product roadmap, the Christian Decisions acquisition happened. So the moment those business constraints start coming in, then you start refactoring your partnership and collaboration models to start supporting them. And this journey is something that goes on through the life cycle of the ISV and through this life cycle of the lab. And that is the focus on which we have built our entire model, and that is extremely key to make sure that we are able to build a successful partnership and collaborative model. I certainly would encourage you to think, what are the gaps and how are you going to fill them? Is the gap in sustaining? Is the gap in automation, test automation? Is the gap in agile adoption? Is the gap in cloud enablement? It's a question of identifying what the gaps are. The second part is, how are you spending your time? Are you spending your time actually in perennial bug fixes? Are you spending your time in actually aligning all the staff and trying to make sure that the customer file is put off? Is the entire work spent on and trying to make sure that the baselining and configuration management is exactly aligned to the way the product strategy was launched in the first place? My personal favorite is, are you in touch with the 3 C's? Are you in touch with the fact that, have you been in touch with the culture? If you've acquired a company, are you sure that you're able to culturally integrate these two companies? Does the partner that works with you, or the partner that you're considering working with, understand the context of your business? Does he or she relate to the business workflow or the business process that you want to optimize? And lastly, how are you addressing the constraints? What comes first and what comes later? The next point that I wanted to mention is, how effective is the process of process? You know, the process is a massive overkill. Everybody says that just because we have a process, everything will work well. Hardly ever does. You have to have a pragmatic process, and you want to make sure that that particular process is something that is not compliant, but that's something that's effective. And unless and until it's an effective process, no product comes out of it. And again, every time that we have delved into that, we have found that you have to develop something that is more creative as far as the process is concerned. Is your team onshore, offshore, nearshore, and more importantly, you have to be very passionate about building the product, because unless and until the people who are partnering and they're collaborating are passionate about building that, and they relate to it in the way that the person who founded that company relates to it, not one product comes out in the way where it is rock solid, and it is something that is going to actually address the customer's vision and customer's need. So that, to borrow Steve Jobs' quote, he used the term that you have to stay hungry and you have to stay foolish. And as far as we are concerned, that's something that I'd like to say, that we imbibe it within our organization. to say that every time that you work with a particular partner, every time that you work with a particular ISV, stay hungry, stay foolish, and most importantly, try to find out what way can you influence their business, what way can you influence the product revenue, services revenue, customer support revenue.